Backstory. The Roman Republic was jealously guarded by those who defended it. This was a grand experiment in history, going against the grain of kings, and there was always a chance a king might arise again. Caesar was powerful and beginning to look and act like a king, and it was a chance that some were not willing to take. Not even Caesar's friend Brutus. A meeting of the Senate being appointed, at which it was believed that Caesar would be present. They agreed to make use of that opportunity, for then they might appear all together without suspicion. And besides, they hoped that all the noblest and leading men of the Commonwealth, being then assembled as soon as the great deed was done, would immediately stand forward and assert the common liberty. The very place, too, where the Senate was to meet, seemed to be by divine appointment favorable to their purpose. It was a portico, one of those joining the theater with a large recess, in which there stood a statue of Pompey, erected to him by the Commonwealth, when he adorned that part of the city with the porticos in the theater. To this place it was that the Senate was summoned for the middle of March. The Ides of March is the Roman name for the day, as if some more than human power was leading the man thither, there to meet his punishment for the death of Pompey. As soon as he came out of his litter, Publius Linus, he who but a little before had wished Brutus good success in his undertaking, coming up to him, conversed a great while with him, Caesar standing still all the while, and seeming to be very attentive. The conspirators, to give them this name, not being able to hear what he said, but guessing by what themselves were conscious of, that this conference was the discovery of their treason, were again disheartened, and looking upon one another, agreed from each other's countenances that they should not stay to be taken, but should all kill themselves. And now when Cassius and some others were laying hands upon their daggers under their robes, and were drawing them out, Brutus, viewing narrowly the looks and gesture of Linus, and finding that he was earnestly petitioning and not accusing, said nothing, because there were many strangers to the conspiracy mingled amongst them, but by a cheerful countenance encouraged Cassius. And after a little while Linus, having kissed Caesar's hand, went away, showing plainly that all his discourse was about some particular business relating to himself. Now when the Senate was gone in before to the chamber where they were to sit, the rest of the company placed themselves close about Caesar's chair, as if they had some suit to make him. And Cassius, turning his face to Pompey's statue, is said to have invoked it, as if it had been sensible of his prayers. Trebonius, in the meanwhile, encouraged Antony's attention at the door and kept him in talk outside. When Caesar entered, the whole Senate rose up to him. As soon as he was sat down, the men all crowded round about him and set Tullius Cimber, one of their own number, to intercede in behalf of his brother that was banished. They all joined their prayers with his, and took Caesar by the hand and kissed his head and his breast. But he, putting aside at first their supplications, and afterwards, when he saw they would not desist, violently rising up, Tullius, with both hands, caught hold of his robe and pulled it off from his shoulders, and Casca, that stood behind him, drawing his dagger, gave him the first, but a slight wound, about the shoulder. Caesar, snatching hold of the handle of the dagger, and crying out aloud in Latin, "Villain Casca, what do you?" He, calling in Greek to his brother, bade him come and help. And by this time, finding himself struck by a great many hands, and looking around about him to see if he could force his way out, when he saw Brutus with his dagger drawn against him, he let go Casca's hand that he had hold, and covering his head with his robe, gave up his body to their blows. And they so eagerly pressed toward the body, and so many daggers were hacking together, that they cut one another. Brutus particularly received a wound in his hand, and all of them were besmeared with the blood.